Picture this. We are in Berlin, the capital city of Germany. And it's cold enough to make you question all your life choices, and raining just enough to make your hair look like an abandoned bird's nest. But hey, that's the charm of Berlin in winter. Did you know Berlin has over 180 museums, more bridges than Venice, and once had a king who was so obsessed with potatoes he had them planted in royal gardens just to make people think they were rare? Yeah, I know. Berlin's history is wild. Today, we're braving the chill to explore Berlin's landmarks, deep history, and a bit of culture, all in one epic rainy day. So grab a coffee, wrap yourself in a blanket, and let's take a stroll through the past. Our day starts near Trabbewood 5D Cinema on Zimmerstraße. And Trabbewood is all about those tiny, adorable, and totally impractical East German cars, the Trabant 601s. These little guys were basically made of recycled cotton and resin. And guess what? There was a 10-year waiting list to get one back in the day. Can you imagine? Waiting a whole decade, just to own a car that barely goes 100 kilometers per hour, downhill with a tailwind. Just a few steps away are the ghosts of the Berlin Wall, quite literally. This wall used to cut this city in half, and even today, you'll find metal markers on the ground where it once stood. But before that, the Air Service Berlin Weltballon is one of the world's largest helium balloons, giving you a 360-degree view of Berlin. But it is not happening today because, between the wind and rain, getting in that balloon would be like signing up for a very dramatic weather report. This next stop is heavy and it is known as the Topography of Terror. As we walk towards it, the atmosphere is somber, and people with umbrellas passing by, their footsteps echoing on the wet ground. Alright, I may be dramatizing it a bit, but have you ever stepped into a place and immediately feel its weight? For me, that's exactly what it's like walking into the Topography of Terror. And there were no grand doors, no fancy architecture, but just cold concrete, open space, and the lingering echoes of history. This museum sits on Wilhelmstraße, once the heart of Nazi Germany's power. Right here, where I'm standing, was the headquarters of the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police and the SS, the people responsible for some of the worst crimes in human history. If these streets could talk, they'd whisper things we'd rather not hear. All right, deep breath, because what's inside is not for the faint-hearted. The exhibition halls are sleek, modern, and deliberately minimalistic. And there's no sugarcoating here, but just raw history, laid out in black and white photographs, documents, and first-person testimonies. It's not your typical museum with fancy paintings and sculptures. Instead, you get raw, unfiltered history. Photos, documents, and survivor testimonies. It's divided into sections, each one peeling back a layer of the Nazi regime's brutal machinery. And let me warn you, because some of this is hard to look at. You'll see images of the perpetrators, the men who carried out these atrocities, living their lives, sometimes even laughing. And then, in the next frame, you'll see what their victims endured. And it's jarring. It's disturbing. But it's real. One section focuses on the role of propaganda, like how the Nazi manipulated the public, how they turned neighbors against each other. Another section documents the persecution of Jews, political opponents, and other marginalized groups. There are also letters and diary entries from everyday people, some who resisted, and others who simply looked away. Right next to the Topography of Terror, standing like a ghost of Berlin's past, is one of the longest surviving sections of the Berlin Wall. This isn't just a random chunk of concrete, but it's a 164-meter-long stretch of the original wall, still standing, still scarred by time, and still telling its story. And let's be real, because it's a lot less colorful than the East Side Gallery, where artists have covered the wall with murals. Instead, here, well, it's raw, stripped down, and brutally real. It went up in 1961, practically overnight, splitting Berlin in two for 28 years. But to really understand why this museum is here, you need to understand Berlin itself. Berlin was once the crown jewel of Prussia, a city of kings, philosophers, and artists. By the 1920s, it was a cultural powerhouse, and think of it as the New York of Europe, with jazz bars, experimental theater, and intellectual salons. But then came the Nazi, and suddenly, this vibrant city became the epicenter of war, destruction, and division. Fast forward to 1945 and Berlin became a pile of rubble. And if that wasn't enough, it gets carved up like a birthday cake. West Berlin goes to the Americans, Brits, and French, while East Berlin falls under Soviet control. And enter the Berlin Wall, which is a brutal, physical reminder that this city was literally torn in two. I am not going to go through the history and the sad events of war. In fact, I am just going to skip the entire thing and bring you to 1989. So in 1989, something incredible happened, because the wall falls, and Berliners flood the streets, hugging, crying, celebrating. And just like that, the city is whole again. But here's the thing. Reunification? Well, it was really not as easy as it sounds. Today, Berlin is a city that wears its history like a scar, because it doesn't hide it, it doesn't erase it. Instead, it embraces it. This city has been through a lot, with bombings, dictatorship, occupation by 4 different Allied powers, and then being physically split in two for 28 years. And yet, it survived. It's the capital of one of the world's strongest economies, home to over 3.7 million people, a hub of art, technology, and international culture. The Topography of Terror Museum was first established in 1987, but it officially opened in its current form in 2010. And it's free to enter. The rain has slowed to a drizzle, making the wet streets gleam under the soft morning light. I think we all need a little breather after that deep dive into history. And what better place to reset than one of Berlin's most stunning art and exhibition spaces, the Martin Gropius Bau. He was the great-uncle of Walter Gropius, the founder of the Bauhaus movement. The building was built in 1881, and it was originally meant to be a museum for the arts and crafts. But then World War II happened, and, like most of Berlin, it got heavily bombed. We're off to see where Berlin's decisions get made, and it's the Berlin House of Representatives. And it is located just opposite the Martin Gropius Bau. Back in the day, this building was the seat of Prussia's parliament. Then after World War II, it became part of West Berlin's government, and today? Well, it's the House of Representatives for the Berlin Senate. Kindly forgive the pronunciations. And we're making our way down Streseemannstraße, but let's not rush. Berlin is one of those cities where walking isn't just about getting from A to B, instead, it's about absorbing the layers of history around you. You know, if you stood on this very street 100 years ago, you'd be in the middle of one of Berlin's busiest commercial districts. This was the financial heart of the city, lined with banks, elegant shops, and grand hotels. Fast forward to World War II, and much of this area was obliterated, bombed out, burned down, and left in ruins. Then came the Berlin Wall, slicing the city in half. and this very street ran right along the border, making it a symbol of division. Now, as we approach Ebertstraße, we're stepping closer to some of Berlin's most powerful and emotional landmarks. Ahead of us lies the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe, a place that's hauntingly beautiful, deeply moving, and absolutely unforgettable. A vast field of grey concrete slabs stretches before us, stark, uniform, yet unsettlingly uneven. And the rain has almost stopped, leaving behind a misty chill. And the stones glisten slightly, tiny puddles forming in their cracks. So, what's the meaning behind this? Well, that's the thing, there's no official explanation. The architect, Peter Eisenman, designed it to make you feel something rather than tell you exactly what to think. And it works. At first, it seems structured, perfectly laid out, symmetrical. But the deeper you walk in, the more disoriented you feel. Some say it represents loss, isolation, fear, and the way Jewish families were stripped of their homes, their names, their humanity during the Holocaust. For me, it's a reminder that history isn't something you just read about. And when you step inside, you feel a glimpse of what it means to be trapped, powerless, lost. And that's something no history book can ever truly capture. But as we move forward, the scene opens up to a grand square ahead, and in the distance, the unmistakable Brandenburg Gate stands tall. We step into one of Berlin's most iconic and uplifting places known as Pariser Platz. This place has seen it all. It's been a royal boulevard, a war zone, a Cold War no-go zone, and now? Well, it's a buzzing, beautiful square. And here it is, the one, the only, Brandenburg Gate. It's the city's ultimate symbol of unity, resilience, and reinvention. Built in 1791, this was meant to be a grand entrance to the city, inspired by the gates of ancient Athens. Napoleon loved it so much that when he conquered Berlin, he just stole the Quadriga statue and took it back to Paris. For nearly 30 years, the Brandenburg Gate stood trapped, completely blocked off, stuck in a no-man's land between East and West. And then, November 9th, 1989, the wall comes down, Berlin reunites, and for the first time in decades, people walk through this gate, together. And now, anyone can walk through it. No passport checks, no armed guards, but instead, just good vibes and great selfies. Talking about great selfies, just next to the gate, there is this building known as Palais Arm on Pariser Platz, and you can enter it and take some nice photographs inside. And we did just that. Sadly though, I don't have more details about this building. If you know anything about it, drop us a note in the comments section. Alright, we're heading toward the Bundestag, where Germany's government runs the show. And that massive building up ahead, that's the Reichstag, Berlin's most important political landmark. This building has been through more drama than a Netflix series. Built in 1894, it was meant to be the proud home of German democracy. But then, fire, war, division, Cold War tension, you name it, it happened here. In 1933, it was mysteriously set on fire, and it was an event that the Nazi used as an excuse to take over Germany. Then came World War II, the bombings, the battles, and eventually, in 1945, this was where the final fight for Berlin happened. The Soviets stormed in, raised their flag over the Reichstag, and just like that, Hitler's reign was over. 4 decades, it just sat here, a ruined relic in a divided city. But after reunification, Germany decided to bring it back, and now it's the seat of Germany's parliament, complete with a stunning glass dome you can actually visit. This is one of the coolest views in Berlin, with 360-degree panoramas of the city, all from inside a dome that symbolizes transparency in government. And the best part? It's free. But you just have to book in advance. Time for a scenic stroll. And let us take a walk along the Spree River, which cuts right through Berlin. Alright, let's pause for a second. And see those buildings over there, across the Spree River? They're not just random office blocks, but they're actually part of Berlin's government district, packed with history, art, and political power. One of the coolest places hiding in plain sight is the Kunst im Bundestag, which literally means art in the parliament. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait, art? In a government building? Yes. And because why just make laws when you can look at amazing artwork while doing it? Let's talk about something that's been here long before any Reich, the Republic, or the Brandenburg Gate, and that is the Spree River. It's the lifeblood of Berlin. It's been flowing through this land for millennia, and if you follow it, it weaves through Germany for 400 kilometers before eventually joining the Elbe River and making its way to the North Sea. Think of it as Berlin's ancient highway, as back in the days, this was how people, goods, and ideas moved. Well, if you stabbed a pin right into the middle of Europe, you'd land pretty close. Berlin sits in northeastern Germany, about 70 kilometers from Poland. And it's got no mountains, no coastlines, but just flat land, rivers, and a whole lot of history. Back in the 1600s, this was just a modest Prussian town. But then the Hohenzollern dynasty came along, poured money into it, and suddenly Berlin was the center of military and political power. By the 1870s, Berlin wasn't just the capital of Prussia anymore, but, in fact, it was the capital of a newly unified German empire. If you're planning a trip, Berlin is super easy to get to, and if you're flying in, you'll land at Berlin-Brandenburg Airport, which is about 30 minutes from the city center. If you're coming by train, Berlin Central Station is massive, and from there, you can get anywhere fast. And if you're road tripping? Well, Berlin's got a great autobahn system, so driving in from anywhere in Germany is a breeze. We've reached Spreebrücke Bahnhof Friedrichstraße. And try saying that 5 times fast. This spot right here was once a Cold War border crossing, nicknamed the Palace of Tears. Back when Berlin was divided, this was one of the very few places where East and West Berliners could meet, but often, it was the last stop before a painful farewell. Families were separated, people crossed into the unknown, and not everyone could return. But today, well, it's just another busy Berlin train station, where trains come, people go, and no one has to ask permission to cross a border anymore. This bridge is actually a symbol of connection, between neighborhoods, between histories, and between people. On one side, you've got the modern, reunited Berlin. On the other, the echoes of the city's past. And right here, standing in the middle, you can almost feel the weight of history beneath your feet. But, you know, it's also just a really nice bridge and great for a photo, especially if you want that contemplative traveler vibe. As you are here admiring the city landscape, do remember to subscribe to our channel if you have not done so. And do drop us a comment to let us know about your feeling while watching this video, or to share your own experience of Berlin. The area around where we are now is considered part of central Berlin, the heart of the city. But for me, it was our best bet to find some nice decent food, as I was famished from all this walking. And I did not realize it, but it has suddenly gotten dark. Even though the rain has now completely stopped, the skies remain grey and dark, and everywhere around us felt like 7 p.m. And by the time we finished our meal, it has gotten properly dark now. It was nighttime. We must have spent a lot of time walking around Berlin, so much that we did not even notice how late it was. Alright, let's be real because we've walked a whole lot today. My legs. Well, let's just say they are questioning my life choices. And right before dinner, my stomach was also screaming loudly, demanding answers. But let's be honest, after today's history-heavy itinerary, I need something comforting. And maybe a beer, or two. All for educational purposes, of course. There's something about Berlin at night and it's like a different city. And the same streets we walked this morning feel softer now, more reflective. Maybe it's the dim glow of the streetlights, but suddenly, I'm thinking about everything we saw today. We walked through some of the darkest chapters of history. The Berlin Wall, the Topography of Terror, the Holocaust Memorial as well, and yet, what's incredible is how Berlin refuses to hide from its past. And instead, it confronts it. And yet, here we are, in a city that rebuilt itself, in a place where history lives side by side with the present. Berlin isn't just a museum of the past, it's a city that keeps evolving. It's bold, it's raw, and honestly, it's kind of impossible not to fall in love with it. So, if you're wondering, should you visit Berlin? And the simple answer is, yes. Come for the history, and stay for the unexpected. And with that, we're calling it a night. And, if you loved this Berlin trip, you have to check out last week's adventure in Nuremberg. That city was straight out of a medieval fairy tale, with half-timbered houses, an epic castle, and some seriously good history. Just click the end card which will appear about now and remember to subscribe if you have not done so, and hit that notification bell so that you do not miss our future videos.